everyone. Sometimes in the longer videos, people complain that they get tired of staring at the PowerPoint. So I thought maybe you can stare at me and that'd be better. Probably it won't. Don't you like my slick headset? It's like I'm a telemarketer. Hello, are you just sitting down to dinner? Do you have a few minutes to talk about our special offer? I'm just kidding. All right. What I do want to talk to you about is tone and audience. How's that for a segue? Tone and audience kind of harkens back to whenever we talked about fat P. Remember that from like the first or second video that I did. The letters don't exactly match up, so don't freak out if you can't remember what they are. But it is kind of the same in terms of us talking about, who we're writing for and what we want our message to sound like. And so here's what we want our message to sound like. When we talk about tone, we want it to be confident, personal, and professional. Here's what I mean by these things. First, let's start with confidence. A lot of times, some of you will write for no particular reason, or without thinking about it. You'll write things like, although I might not be the best qualified candidate, no. Or although I may have gotten kicked out of my internship, no. Here's another one that I hear a lot. Although I'm going to have a steep learning curve, no. All of these things make it sound like you don't think that you can do the job, all right? And you always want to sound like you can do the job. If you don't think that you can, don't apply, all right? But if you're going to apply, do so with confidence, present yourself in the best possible light, and know that during the interview, there will be a time for you to talk about your weaknesses. They will always ask you, what are your weaknesses? And you will give them some sort of canned answer about how you're a perfectionist and just work too hard. And they'll roll their eyes because they know that you're lying. And that's what everybody says. But anyway, the point is that there is a time for you to talk about your shortcomings, and it's at a time when you can explain it yourself and, in context about the things that you're going to need to learn. But your cover letter is not the place for that. So always come at it from a very positive, straightforward, honest, and confident way. Now, the latter two, personal and professional, these are things that people think are diametrically opposed. Like if you're, talking personally, you can't be professional, and vice versa. But that's not true. Here's what I mean by not being personal in a letter. I'm actually going to show you a letter that I wrote a long time ago before I knew how to write cover letters. And it sounds like a robot wrote it, okay? There's no humanity in it at all. Like when I say personal, like, showing your personality, I don't mean like your mom thinks of you as having personality. Like, oh, he's got so much personality. No, I mean like showing that you're a real person, with hopes and aspirations and interests and, and that, you have some humanity. But when I wrote this is what I wrote. Please find attached my hereby completed application for the blah, 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 position number 001. And that sounds like a robot wrote it. That's lame. So don't do that. So you always want to write using real words, and we're going to talk more about that later. Now, professional, here's what I mean by professional. I have an illustration for you, an example, if you will. Imagine that you're going to work at a zoo. Think about the difference between what you tell your best friend versus what you would put forward, in a cover letter to your potential boss. So you might tell your best friend, like, oh my God, I'm going to get to play with big cats and hopefully they won't maul me because I've loved tigers since I was a little child. No, that's like a very personal one, or a very unprofessional, we'll call it. Over here, very professional side, you would say something more along the lines of, I've always had a passion for the conservation of large cats because they're so important to the ecosystem. And you see that the way that you convey professionalism is in the words and phrases that you choose and in your sentence structure. So we can work on that. The best thing to do whenever you're typing is write it out one time, go back and read it. If it doesn't sound professional, you can always change words, change phrases, etc., etc. All right. Ask yourself, who am I writing for? Why am I writing this letter, and what is my objective? Chances are you're writing it for a real person that you can look up and learn things about. The reason that you're always writing a letter is to hopefully get an interview. And then what is my objective? And what I mean by this is like, how do you want to be perceived? Like, how do you want them to think about you? Like, what skills or accomplishments do you want them to, best associate you with? And so think about those things. And then whenever you write your letter, it'll come out more clear and more focused. All right. We'll talk more about that as we go. All right. This one's important. Here's the thing about the audience. The audience is not you. It's not really about you. This is not a sort of self-aggrandizing, I'm going to write a letter to talk about all the cool things that I've done and how amazing I am. No. This letter is about your potential employer, all right? And so here's the thing, they see you, and this is going to come as a shock to many of you, but like you're really, like, you know, you and every other employee is a means to an end for whatever the mission of the organization is. So whenever you know, write, like they want for you to be qualified, they want for you to be a good fit, but they want you to do that in the context of that will help them reach their mission, you know, or achieve their goals or whatever it is. So whenever you write your letter, you always want to write about how good you are and, you know, the experiences that you've had, and the skills that you bring to the workplace, but you always want to write it in terms of, you know, how you will help them and be of benefit to the organization, and not just how awesome you are. Even if you are awesome, like that's not what it's about here. So, and then the last point there, present yourself as the best candidate for the job as the organization describes it. And what I mean by this is always keep the position description, the written position description, handy, because a lot of us, you know, especially when we're applying for jobs that we know a lot about, like say extension agent or ag teacher, like we have in our mind a conceptualization of what that job entails. And a lot of times, if we don't keep going back to the position description, we will, you know, write for that, you know, extension job as we understand it. And if it's the way that we understand it is usually way different than what the job actually is, then when they get the letter, you know, they're gonna say like, wow, this kid doesn't know what he's applying for. And here's an example of this. Everyone thinks that 4-H agents get to play with children all day long. Like that's a thing that they do. And so if you're like, I've always loved working with children and that's why I want to be a 4-H agent, nowhere in the position description does it mention that you should like or love children. And so when you turn that in, the person reads it and they say, wow, this person really doesn't know what they're applying for. And then they're less apt to get the job. By the way, as a 4-H agent, you seldom get to work with children. All right, let's talk about the general format of the letter. Some of this is a little bit redundant, but we're going to whip through it. So follow the standard business letter format. Here's what I mean by this. It has an introduction, a middle, and an end, and it's organized according to a, you know, accepted business letter, you know, format. And the one that I want you to use is called full left block or full block or block. I think it's just one of those. Anyway, I'm going to give you an example. It should always only be one page, and it should always include your contact information in the last paragraph. Now let me show you. What are you doing, iTunes? Why do you want to download things? All right, phone carrier set. I don't know what that means, I'm afraid. All right, so here's an example that I've included under the resources in Scholar for you. And only you, just you, not your classmates, only you. Anyway, and what it is it's a you know, it's a business letter helper guide. Basically, it talks about like what are the parts of the business letter, so sender's address, date, you know, and explains about it, and then it gives you an examples. So this is an example letter, and it tells you like what each thing is: date, inside address. I made them big and red with arrows. There's no way that this could be easier. And to make it even better, we talk about spacing. So 2 inches from the top if possible, 1 blank line here, 3 to 7 blank lines here, 1 blank line here, one, so on and so forth. I will mark off some major points if you don't get the format of your letter right, because it tells me that you're not trying. And the other thing is that no matter how good in the real world, no matter how good your content is, no matter how bright you are, if you try to send something in an accepted format like a letter and you can't get the format right, they're going to deduct credibility points. They're going to be like, this kid don't know how to write a letter. I'm not going to read his letter. You know, so there you go. That's why format is important. All right. My phone carrier settings were updated. Excellent. I'm glad you guys could be a part of this. All right, so let's move on. Finally, when you address your letter, you always want to address it to a real person. It's sort of like, think about whenever you get something in the mail at your house and it's like, dear resident, and you're like, this person doesn't know me. It's the same way whenever the hiring authority gets the letter and it says, you know, dear sir or madam, and you're like, wow, this person didn't take time to look it up. So try your best. If for some reason you can't find it, Dear Selection Committee or Dear Sir or Madam will work, but understand that that's not ideal at all. All right, let's talk about what goes into the letter. So the letter introduces you to the employer. It explains why you're writing and applying for the job, you know, in so many words. And it details why you're a good match for the job. Remember, we talked about fit. It also demonstrates your ability and establishes credibility. I'm a worthwhile person. I'm good at things. Please hire me. And then it draws your reader's attentions to certain qualities or accomplishments. Now, remember that the way that like cover letter gets its name is that it actually covers the resume, like it goes on top of it like this. And when they read it, you can think of the cover letter as priming the reader for, looking for certain things in your resume. So if you know that the job entails a lot of like, leadership. Uh, you know, like experience, you may highlight in your letter that you've had a lot of leadership experiences and then direct them to the sections in the resume where you go into that in greater detail. And so it sort of primes them so that as they're reading the resume, it's not just like, oh my God, there's 2 pages of stuff. They're going to start to home in on like, oh, I really need to read this section on leadership because this kid, sort of referenced, made this a big deal, and so I should probably read it. Does that make sense? Okay. And it also provides a sample of your written communication skills. Let me tell you how like people, you're being judged. Like, how like in life people are like, oh, nobody's judging you. They're judging you whenever you submit a letter and resume. And so the good news is that because like between the letter and the resume, it's only 3 pages, there's no reason that it can't be absolutely grammatically perfect. All right. So again, tailor your letter to meet the specific needs of employer. Talk about how your goals align with their mission of the organization. So again, if you're applying to like the Sierra Club, like you want to show that, conservation is your thing. You wouldn't come in at them and then talk about how like, on your family's farm, clear cutting is the thing that you love to do. Like that wouldn't jive. They'd be like, oh, this kid won't fit here because he likes to cut down the forest. I understand about clear cutting. That was an example. Anyway, don't hurt me, forestry kids. All right. So persuade them that the skills and experiences match up to the position requirements, that not only are you qualified, but that you're qualified for the position that they're hiring for. Duh. And then the last one is important. So I'm going to slow down because sometimes I talk really fast. You need to tell a story. It's your cover letter needs to be full of personality in terms of like you're a human, and so you don't just want to list stuff from your resume because that's what your resume does. It just lists stuff. You want to put it into some kind of like storyfied explanation or give some context. I'm going to give you an example in a moment. Where did this Coke come from? All right, let's talk about parts of the letter and how to write them. All right, there are 3 parts of the letter. Don't overthink it. They're the introduction, which comes first, the argument, which comes in the middle, and the closing, which comes last. Let's start with the introduction. All right, the introduction says, among other things, who you are and why you're writing. People forget this. You're so-and-so from the College of Ag and Life Sciences at Virginia Tech, and you're writing to apply for, X position at this company. A lot of times people will do this. They'll write, what do they say? They write and they say, I'm writing to seek more information about this job. And I'm like, and I read their cover letter. I'm like, do you want this job or do you just want like a brochure? And they're like, no, I want the job. And I'm like, well, then you should say that you're applying for the job. Like, don't beat around the bush. Don't make them guess. All right. And then you always want to state how you heard about the job because what it does is it gives you some context as a person. Like, did you find this job on the internet? Did you find it in like the Quarter Horse Journal, the trade journal? Did you find it? Did you run into a recruiter, at like a campus career fair? If you can mention those things, then it gives you some context. So you're not just Joe Schmo off the street. You're Joe Schmo that Bob the recruiter met at the Virginia Tech career fair. See what I'm doing there? All right. And so if somebody told you about the job, you definitely want to name drop. Don't be, shameful about it. Especially like if you're, say a major professor, like, encourage you to apply for this job because they know good things about this company. And you know that the company likes said professor. You might mention that, Professor so-and-so, told me about this job and encouraged me to apply. Then you're no longer like random Joe Schmo. You're Joe Schmo that the professor knows. Do you see what we're doing here? Okay, great. So we want to bring up any previous conversations that we had. Remember earlier when I talked about how it's totally okay to call the organization, and talk to the supervisor if that's a thing that you can do. You may reference that we talked on the phone earlier, looking forward to applying, blah, blah, blah. And then the last one, briefly mention your interests or qualifications. This is meant to transition into the second paragraph where you go all about your interests and qualifications. And so, you may say things like, I'm excited to apply for this company because I've always had a passion for, raising genetically modified crops since I was a young child. In fact, when I raised genetically modified crops in my backyard. That's a joke. Anyway, all right, so let's move on. So the argument then becomes when you take the 2 to 3 most important qualifications that you feel that you have for this specific position, and then lay them out like in an argument form. All right. And so, I mean, you don't want to sound argumentative, like hire me or I'll hit you. Like that's not what I'm saying. But you do want to, give them a 1-2 punch. All right. It's a metaphor though. Don't actually hit them. Here's what I mean by this. So the 1-2 punch that I'm talking about is one stating like what your skill or qualification is. And then secondly, giving an example of it. So a lot of times what I hear from people, they'll write, I'm a hard worker. I, like enjoy working in teams. I'm a great communicator. And I'm like, who are you to just tell me a bunch of stuff that you think you're good at and expect me to believe it? Like I need to see some proof. And so here's an example. If, for example, the position description calls to, like it says, you're going to need to work as part of a diverse team, to carry out like X. You wouldn't just want to say, oh, I have excellent teamwork skills. What does that tell me? Do I believe you? No. So you would write something to the effect of, one, here it is. I'm glad that you can see me because I can actually do things. Anyway, so one is, I have a lot of experience working in a team and am a good team player. That's the one. And then the second part is where you give an example. And so you would say, during my internship at X company, I worked as part of a team to put on an event for 1,000 people that taught people about ag. That was kind of a example off the top of my head. But you see what we did there. We talked about the skills that we had, and then we gave an example of those skills and where we got them and how it benefited the company. Great. So this slide's kind of redundant. Show the reader you possess the skills he or she seeks. Convince the reader the organization will benefit from hiring you. This seems self-evident, but a lot of people don't do that. Include specific arguments. Keep an upbeat and professional tone. Remember we talked about that. Don't get down on yourself. You're a winner. And then don't explain your whole resume, but do refer to it. So, again, point out certain key parts. Say, please see in my resume where blah, 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 blah. Here's an example of a story kind of telling way with the 1-2 punch. So this kid wrote, my communication skills in the workplace have grown because of my internships. See how they're setting the stage there? And that's like a story. When I was an intern at Newberry and Jones, I wrote memos and letters to customers and colleagues on a daily basis. This experience taught me to write professionally and to the point. Now notice how all these three things together make a much more compelling argument than if they had just wrote, I can write professionally and to the point. And then stopped. I guess that would kind of be self-evident anyway. So that's what they can do. That's the skill that they're bringing. But then they also give an example of where they got that. They were an intern at Newberry and Jones and they wrote memos. The other thing that people do is they just list duties, and that's a bad thing. So if this same paragraph here had only read, I was an intern at Newberry and Jones, and there I wrote newsletters and memos and letters to customers and colleagues, period, full stop. And that was the end of it. That also would be really lame because that's just you telling me things that are on your resume. So notice how when we put these three things together, it makes it way better. All right. So if you're unique, show you're unique. If you want awards, great, good for you. Please list those. And then also if you're able to show that you've benefited past employers, then by all means, like lay that out. Sometimes you won't be able to do this if you're really young in the game. Like I've been around a little while, and so if I were applying for another fundraising or academic job, I would be able to say I've raised or brought in the form of grants like $1.4 million to the 4-H program in Florida, and enabled it to do X, Y, and Z. And so they can look and say, wow, this kid did this really good thing that benefited the past employer. Maybe he can do this for us. We should hire him. All right. The last thing is the close. Here's what I mean by the close. It's the one place where you're allowed to be redundant in this entire process. And so you can think about it as the things that you want to leave them with. Usually the things that people read last are the things that they remember. So it's okay to reiterate at this point. So you want to restate briefly why you align with the mission and goals of the organization. You want to talk about how your skills match the job, and how your experience will help the organization. And then you want to inform your readers when you will contact them. This shows like initiative, basically, is what we're doing here. And so an example might be, I will follow up with you all by telephone in 2 weeks to make sure that you receive my cover letter and resume. And then they are sort of on notice to know that, wow, this kid's going to call me. I better be prepared. And so So that's not applicable in every job. If you're applying to like a government job like the USDA where there's like a million people applying, you probably shouldn't do that because they don't want to hear from you. But if it's a smaller company, where being personal and hands-on is a little more appropriate, then that's totally an okay thing to do. I'm going to give you examples in a minute. Provide your contact information in the last paragraph. Remember, because we want them to read it as opposed to it being in the format of the letter somewhere. So, you might say things like, if you have any questions about my qualifications, please feel free to contact me at, X phone number and email address. And then lastly, if you're ever looking for a way to close, thank the readers for their time. It's gold. Like there's no way that you can not thank, like that's the way to do it. I want to back up real quick because I forgot to tell you something that's really important. In the personal professional realm, where did it go here? Oh, it's even further back. Man, all right. So here's the thing. When we're talking about personal and professional, this is one of my pet peeves. Like you're allowed to be passionate about things, you're allowed to care about things, you're allowed to be dedicated and excited and feature unwavering curiosity. You're not allowed to love stuff at work. I want you to know this. So, and I'm mainly looking at you girls. People will write things like, I love to work with animals, or I just love working in the soil out in the field. And I love doing things in the, like, no, love is not a word that we use to describe the things that we do at work. All right. That's just a thing that you need to know. It's like a pet peeve of mine because it's not professional. All right. We've done this. We've done this. I'm glad that you guys could be here for this rehash of the thing. All right, here's an example. I'm eager to speak with you and discuss my possible contribution to county press. This is an example of a close. I feel my experiences in communication and customer service will be an asset to the company. I will be in touch with you within 2 weeks, and if you need to reach me, you can call me at blah blah blah. Thank you for your time and consideration. You see how this is the full close paragraph. This is everything. This is why I feel I'm a great catch for the company. Why, like, when I'll be in touch, and my contact information and how you can reach me. This is textbook. Good job, person that's applying to Country Press. Here's one if you're applying to like a really large company like the USDA or the National Resources Conservation, National Conservation, NRCS, whatever that stands for, or a university. A lot of times there isn't somebody that you can call and talk to that knows a lot about this job. Usually it's an HR person. Their job is to hire people. They don't know about like the given work that you're doing. And so for this one, you might take out that section and just say, if you need to contact me, please feel free to contact me. You don't tell them that you'll be in touch. All right. We're going to talk about the right words in the next PowerPoint little video thing and final one, just FYI. All right. Thanks. You've been a great audience. Stick with me.